Hello all and welcome. And I am the Realist Philosopher, and in this video I'd like to talk about the subject of nationalism and why it isn't actually ethnic, racially, or anything else of that nature centered. Now first off, don't use Google's definition, because Google has added to the original definition to throw in the belief that race, and one's race being superior, is part of the definition of nationalism at its foundational level, and this is absolutely false. And it's a representation of just how dishonest Google is in their attempts to conflate the idea of nationalism with Nazism. Also shows how far to the left they have skewed. So, no. The definition of nationalism is as follows: devotion to the interests or cultures of a particular nation-state. That's it. Now, as you can see, there's nothing about race being better or superior in there. Nope. Now, it is true that nationalism can and often does occur in concert with other things, but those other things are not nationalism. Regardless, let me list some of the more common representations of what nationalism is before I debunk all of them. So, number one, ethnic nationalism, okay? Civic nationalism, expansionist nationalism, romantic nationalism, cultural nationalism, revolutionary nationalism, post-colonial nationalism, and liberation nationalism. This isn't all of them, by the way. It's the majority, but not all. Now, the first type is the German type, the type that you encountered right before and during World War II, and that's ethnic nationalism. Now, do we have that in America right now? Absolutely not. Quite the opposite, in fact. America's called the melting pot for a reason. I mean, heck, how could it be a nationalistic country centered around white people if white people are decried as being horrible, evil people who need to be gone? You can't even argue white nationalism, as Trump, nor anyone else in power, has advocated such. They haven't even remotely advocated for whites being the only race in the country, which is how white nationalism would manifest itself if it actually existed in America, which it does not. Who's advocating for booting all non-white people out of the country? Anybody? No. Is anybody calling for ethnic, racial purity? No. I mean, some people could argue that because the majority of the government is white, that indicates white nationalism, even though that doesn't represent the idea, the definition of an ethnic state that has just one ethnicity and wants to boot everybody else. And by the way, yeah, the majority of the population is white, so of course the majority of the government is going to be white. I thought that the left was all about equality. What about equal representation? I mean, if 70% of the country is white, wouldn't it make sense that about 70% of the government would be white also? I guess not. Anyhow, next. Expansionist nationalism. Now, expansionist nationalism is an aggressive and radical form of nationalism that incorporates autonomous, patriotic sentiments with a belief in expansionism. Okay, sound familiar? Should. It's Nazi Germany before and during World War II. Two types of nationalism manifesting in one nation state? Anyhow, next. Now, next we have what is identified as cultural nationalism. Now, cultural nationalism is a form of nationalism in which the nation is defined by a shared culture. It's an intermediate position between ethnic nationalism and civic nationalism. At least this definition says so. Therefore, it focuses on a national identity shaped by cultural traditions, but not on the concepts of common ancestry or race. Right. Now, the ideology of cultural nationalism encompasses the feelings of cultural pride that people have in a society. This society is typically an ethnically diverse makeup. Okay, right away. Alarm bells are going off. Okay. Is typically an ethnically diverse makeup of people who have common cultural beliefs. Any of us with a brain know that if you have ethnically diverse people, you have diverse cultures, not common ones. But anyway, and a common language, but not a common race or ancestry, even though culture, as I made clear in the past, is a reflection of people's ancestry, of their heritage, of their ethnicity, okay? It goes on to say, An ethnically diverse society, usually defined as one with multiple ethnic groups that each comprise a substantial percentage of the population. Multiculturalism, yeah. These societies thus have a shared culture. Wait, what? Multiple ethnic groups, but they all share the same culture. That's the leftist dream, by the way. Yeah. It's not represented in reality because everywhere we see multiple ethnic groups, those ethnic groups have their own culture. But anyway, even when they do not share the same historically common characteristics of a national group. Can somebody show me any country out there where you have a large variety of diverse ethnicities, but they share the same culture? It's not America. That's for sure. America has no culture of its own. White people have no culture of their own. And America is supposed to be a melting pot. You know, not a homogenous country at all. Yes, multiculturalism. So this ain't America, that's for sure. Although some of this exists in America, but not all. Okay, so it continues by saying, essentially, they have a shared culture, even though they don't share a common history or national group. These characteristics mainly being race and ethnicity, which are the main things that influence cultural development, but we'll pretend that they don't, like most leftist social constructivists do. Everything is social. Nothing is biological. Nothing is attributed to evolution or environment. No. So, yes, it goes on to say, hence the ideas and feelings of cultural nationalism are built upon shared ideals and norms among a society. Society is another construct, doesn't exist. Reference one of my earlier videos about how society is a construct and there's no such thing. These shared ideals and norms may include political ideologies, recognition of holidays, a specific and unique cuisine. Oh, yeah. These are all facile representations of a culture. Ooh, cuisine is culture. Yeah, right. The other main idea of cultural nationalism is the shared language of the groups of people. While societies that are ethnically and racially homogenous usually also share a common language, culturally nationalistic societies typically have a common language. And different races of people who also speak a native language from a previous society or country along with that common language. Yeah, keep pushing that multiculturalism in your definitions, huh? Now, as previously stated, feelings of cultural nationalism are not limited to ethnically diverse societies, although it is more common and much easier to define as different ethnicities coexisting with each other in such societies create a cultural umbrella. Right. People in an ethnically homogenous society may feel pride for the society's political ideologies, for example, but not care for or identify feelings of pride towards the common ethnicity of that society. Sounds like wishful thinking on the part of the writer. You shouldn't feel pride toward your common ethnicity. Continues by saying, giving a technical definition of cultural nationalism. You can see the implicit bias here on behalf of the person who wrote this very long definition. So, the implication from what we just read is that multiculturalism is always better and preferable, right? And ethnically homogenous societies, well, they're inferior. Okay, next is revolutionary nationalism, aka radical nationalism. Now, radical nationalism is an ideological theory that calls for a national community, united by a shared sense of purpose and destiny. It was first attributed to adherents of the revolutionary syndicalism and heavily promulgated by Benito Mussolini. Oh, boy, imagine that. Mussolini's revolutionary nationalism, while it distinguished itself from the traditional patriotism and nationalism of the bourgeoisie, displayed many of those features we today identify with the nationalism of underdeveloped peoples. It was an anti-conservative, big surprise, nationalism that anticipated vast social changes, because you can't have social change if you have most of the people wanting to conserve things, right? Hence conservatives. It was directed against both foreign and domestic oppressors. It conjured up an image of a renewed and regenerated nation that would perform a historical mission. It invoked a moral ideal of selfless sacrifice and commitment in the service of collective goals, and it recalled ancient glories and anticipated a shared and even greater glory in the future. Sound familiar?